To Legitimate Targets, everybody. I hope you're all having a great day. Joining me today on our episode is a very special guest, His Excellency, Member of Parliament from South Africa, Andile Mngxitama, is a South African politician. He's a member of the MK party, and he's really riled up the feathers of those in the imperialist states because as they continue to lie about what's going on in South Africa in the fight for land reform, the truth continues to come out. And I hope to bring that truth to light today by asking questions and hopefully enlightening myself and everyone else about what is really happening in South Africa. So, Mr. Parliamentarian Mngxitama, how are you doing? Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for the invite and thank you for having us.
What do you make of Donald Trump's decision to bring these white South Africans to the United States? They're calling them refugees. If you look at these white South Africans, though, the only thing I'll say is they looked like a lot of, what you call in America, trailer park trash. They looked like very working class whites. They didn't look like the landowning whites that have the diamond mines in South Africa, for example. It seems like those ones are still staying in South Africa. Is that true?
Yes, the poor white working class, underclass of white people, and there are very few in South Africa. They are less than 1% of the population. That class, when Donald Trump said, "Oh, come to America," they thought, "Wow, our chance to finally get out of poverty." And the Western movies that project America as the land of milk and honey. They believe they're going to be in New York. They believe they're going to be in Washington, D.C., and they will be, enjoying the great American life. Well, they were taken to the most rural, backward parts of America. So those are just white people who took their chances to try to get out of the self-created poverty, because no white person in South Africa should be poor, given the amount of support that their government gave white people. Those who are part of the underclass, for its own lack of innovation, ended up in economic exclusion and hardship. So they thought this Donald Trump call was an easy way out of the South African hardship. And they were going to the land of milk and honey. Well, they didn't get the big fat hamburger hoping for.
No, they didn't.
Wealth are staying here. The wealth is here.
Yep. It's 100%. They're not leaving their gated communities. Not yet. I want to ask you about MK as a party within the Progressive Caucus, the Progressive Coalition in the South African Parliament. How well is the coalition of MK, EFF, and there's many other parties as well in the coalition, but how is it working today? Obviously, many people have fears about its ability to maintain unity moving forward.
It is the sad reality of left-wing parties across the globe, where the left is unable to hold the line and left unity, except we see in Venezuela, where the left was able to be matured enough to collapse itself into a massive political party with massive possibilities for electoral victory. Now, in South Africa, Progressive Caucus is one of the embryonic processes, which is very, very fragile. And it's facing serious challenges. And you can see white settler capital sponsoring the mushrooming of political parties. Because you see, in South Africa, the black majority is like 80% of the population, unlike in America, where black people will never have political power. Our biggest weapon is our numerical strength, which the enemy understands and is fracturing politically, so that we don't create this black power force, which can use our numerical strength into political capital to be able to bring about the transformation that is required in this country. So even the Progressive Caucus finds itself challenged constantly by this fracturing dynamic created by the ruling class. In South Africa, of course, the ruling class are those who own the means of production, and those are white settler capitalists, what we call the white monopoly capital. That is the ruling class, not black people, not the nascent black bourgeoisie, the real white bourgeoisie, which keeps to the wealth of the country, controls. Of course, we learned from Karl Marx that the ruling class controls the state, controls what's happening in society. This is true in South Africa. The ruling class is white capitalist class, and it controls the economy, it controls politics, it controls what's going on in the media, it controls even our courts. So and it's very clear that it does not want to see the emergence of a cohesive black bloc, a cohesive black front, which is South Africa has a history of radical politics, but as I say, we are still failing to cohere around the central point to realize this massive potential for radical black political transformation.
So it's fair to say that though the very obvious, blatant, day by day racial divisions and the laws surrounding this of apartheid have ended, but the economic apartheid still remains in South Africa.
And that economic apartheid is exactly what gives rise to the actual apartheid, because whatever goes on in society, and as long as there's economic apartheid, black people remain by and large excluded, and the white minority will enjoy, as it does, the benefits of all the wealth. Which South Africa is one of the wealthiest countries, but as I say, shocking, over 50% of our population is considered poor. I mean, another 30% is considered food insecure. White agriculture is exporting food to the UK. I mean, this is crazy. You have a starving population. You have this set of white farmers who control the land and the agricultural sector producing for exports, not to address the national food security challenges which our people faces. So it is a settler economy. It is a racist economy. It is exclusionary social reality. And apartheid is still alive.
I want to ask you a question also about the recent exit of Floyd Shivambu from the position of Secretary General of the MK Party, someone who had a long history at EFF, then comes to MK. What does it say for the health and stability of MK that you now have Shivambu being forced out of the party?
MK is a very strange. Despite its internal ructions, which occur from time to time, it remains a very solid entity. All these internal crises, which are magnified out of proportion, do not affect the actual party itself. People come to MK primarily because of President Zuma, and he's still the leader of the party. He is almost like the Ayatollah Khomeini of the MK party. He is the supreme leader. So long as he's there, the multitude of our people are going to be voting for Mkhonto we Sizwe because they remember how he served them when he was president. And our president is a people's person. He's a very ordinary person, and his touch with the multitude is incredible. So if Floyd came or is gone, it's got no consequences for the MK party. You must only worry when President Zuma is indisposed that the party might have serious problems then.
Well, I say God bless his health and his stability then for the future of MK and the future of South Africa. As one last question for you, what are your main goals moving forward in Parliament? Because you're a relatively new member of the Parliament, and I congratulate you on being inaugurated to this position. What are the main things you want to focus on for your country?
The big theme is decolonization. Decolonization of the economy, decolonization of the knowledge system, decolonization of the agricultural sector, primarily and fundamentally decolonization of the land owning patterns in the country. It is not right, it is evil that 30 years after democracy, Black people only got about 9% of their land back. The majority of land is still in less than 10% of the population. Even there, probably only about 2% of the population owns close to 80% of the land. So this is the fundamental program to redistribute land on a more equitable basis and to create an agricultural sector which is not profit driven, but is driven by a value system that says people first, not profit first, as it is currently going. South Africa is shocking. Our government has allowed white agriculture to poison our nation. We eat GMO maize, morning, lunch, dinner. The GMO situation has been dealt with in Europe. You don't eat GMO maize. Same with China, same with Russia. But in South Africa, we eat GMO every single day. We feed our children GMO foods. But that is because of the profit motive that drives the agricultural sector of South Africa. It is systematically poisoning our children, our nation. And that is why we're one of the sickest nations in the African continent, because our government has allowed white agriculture to poison the nation systematically for profits.
If you could maybe summarize why the subject of land reform without compensation is so important in South Africa, and then we can kind of maybe get into even where that fight is at today.
Firstly, the name of our country is called South Africa. That is an anomaly itself. So the modern South Africa was founded by settler colonialists from Europe. They said, south of Africa. They didn't care what we called ourselves, what we called the country, and so on. So South Africa is a colonial construct. And as you know, colonialists, what they do, they take the land of the natives, turn them into semi-slaves who are proletarianized. So we become workers. In order to survive, we enter into labor, working on the land which belonged to us. And in South Africa, as you might know, there was discovery of diamonds and gold in the mid 1800s. And that pushed further the process of land dispossession, because now they didn't just want the land, but they wanted labor. And as long as Africans had access to land, we refused to work on their mines. So they took all that land and turned us forcefully, violently into workers. That is how modern South Africa was created. And those of us who, as a consequence, by 1913, they arrived here in 1652. Mm-hmm. There were wars and all that process going on. By 1913, a white-only parliament made a law that said 7% of the land will belong to Africans, and they'll take the rest. And then later on, they said, okay, no, give the 13%. They took the rest. So that was the situation up until 1994. for with the democratic project led by Nelson Mandela. So the settler colonialism, these settlers, they arrived here and they settled. And they made sure that they took us out of our lands, enslaved us, basically internal slavery, and created this modernized South Africa. Even if now you come to South Africa, you will be shocked at the conditions of living of the black majority. It's appalling. We live on top of each other in squatter camps, or what Latin America call favelas, in the outskirts of we are basically like refugees in our own. So the whole liberation struggle was to try to bring justice to this injustice of settler colonialism. Because of the climate of South Africa, colonialists settled here in larger numbers than in any other African place, because our climate is much more tolerable for their white skins. And the, 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 the wealth which they found in the country, it's some of the biggest mineral wealth was they, and they kept them, and they enslaved us. 6% of South Africans are considered poor, and that is the black majority. Over 40% of us are employed. Over 60% of children, young people, are unemployed. So to be black in South Africa, trapped in structural exclusion from the mainstay of the economy, which is still white settler in nature. So our struggle is precisely to quarrel with history, to refuse to accept the settlement of history, to try to go back to where we were before the settler colonialists start fighting and harassing.
Looking at the situation today, you have the ANC in alliance with DA, which are the liberal white majority pro-Western party in the country. How is the cause of land reform without compensation actually advancing right now?
The African National Congress, a majority black party for a long time. You see, when colonialists arrived here, they did a number of things. One of them was to civilize us, such as now I'm talking to you in English, the language of the colonized. So they created a class of who were civilized. In other words, they were whitened in their desires and their identity. And this layer became the representatives of colonialism. That's why they built universities, create this class of Africans who would be managers of the colonial project on the behalf of colonial masters, even if they are not here. So the ANC basically was a organization formed by these modernized Africans, colonized Africans. A graphic example is if you give a mouse the education of a cat, you may believe it is a cat. And when it meets a cat, that's me. And it becomes easy language. So that's exactly what the education is done here. Now, the ANC was predominantly created by this layer of colonized Africans who entered Western modernity. And today, they almost lost power as a result of the emergence of the MK, which I'm part of and a member of, a radical black nationalist led by former president. And we are very clear we want land. And we are very clear the land belongs to black. And white people stole this. So our argument is that the colonial question is not settled. Now the DA, which represent land thieves, the party that represents settler colonial, is able to enter into this a joint government, a coalition government with the ANC, to perpetuate the same exclusion and marginalization. So the discussion on land expropriation does not find expression. You know, there is the Expropriation Act which the president has signed. That act does not deal with the fundamental question, which is when the ANC, these educated Africans, were negotiating with the National Party, that party of racist colonialists, when they negotiated New South in 19, it was on the basis that property in the hands of white people. In other words, those who stole our land, now they were legitimately allowed that. That was the central basis of the 1994 democratic settlement, that property in the hands of land is no longer regarded as, if we want that land, we must buy it from the colonialists. So that was the deal that was made. It is in the Constitution. So this piece of legislation which is made, it is not larger, bigger than the Constitution. It must still be subjected to the Constitution, which says land can only be distributed of willing buyer, willing seller. So the willing buyer and a willing. So there's no constitutional amendment. There is no attempt to take land of anyone. But you know, a thief is always anxious. When you see the police, the van of the police passing by, you are a thief. They're so anxious, you jump to run away. So these white people, they know they are holding does not belong to them. So if you just mention land expropriation without compensation, or just land expropriation, they go into this massive colonial anxiety. They think that they are going to lose the property that we know does not legitimately. So this is just the smoke. This is just white anxiety. There is no land expropriation processes going on. We are trying to. In fact, today, a private member of South Africa can make legislative changes and individual member of one of the MKP and Commander Jimmy has made a submission to 25, that one which guarantees this land. So that amendment which is proposed by Commander Jimmy is to change all that, to make land expropriation with going back to 16. Only today we got confirmation that that process is in the system. This matter is going to come before Parliament again, and we hope that he will vote with us. We hope. I don't think it will.
Well, I applaud you in your efforts, and I wish you nothing but the best. Andile Mngxitama, Member of Parliament, thank you so much for joining me. Where should people follow you if they want to stay up to date with all of your work moving forward?
Yeah, they can check me. I am active on X. They can go to Mngxitama 2, and they will find me there. Thank you.